Hello and a really big and warm welcome to this presentation from the Urban Penguin. My name is Andrew Mallett, and in today's presentation we're going to go ahead and take a look at Ansible, but with a slight difference. We're going to be taking a look at how we can manage FreeBSD devices. Now the reason we're doing this is we can learn a lot more about Ansible itself as well as managing FreeBSD. We're going to be able to take a look at different types of connections. You're probably used to the local Ansible connection and the default SSH connection, but we'll be taking a look at how we can connect via SSH using the Python Paramiko connection to FreeBSD devices. We'll also be taking a look at the RAW module and how we can ensure that we have got Python installed on our remote FreeBSD nodes. Come on, let's go through and find our command line and make sure that we can start learning. And look at this, a big warm welcome to the command line of my Ubuntu 2004, and this is my Ansible controller. It's a fresh install of Ansible, so we're going to have to go through and create our Ansible configuration and inventory, but in doing so we can see the parameters necessary to be able to manage our FreeBSD host. I have two hosts, the Ubuntu host, which is my Ansible controller, and I have the remote system, which is my FreeBSD system. Now, as I say, this is a fresh install of Ansible, so I need to create in my home directory my Ansible configuration, and that's going to be a file called .ansible.cfg. So a hidden file within my home directory, and this is where we can put our parameters. Now again, we are probably used to some of the simple parameters that we put in. So underneath the defaults heading, we can go through and add in our remote user. So the user account that we need to connect as. And I'm going to have this set up as Vagrant. I'm using Vagrant as my virtual machine management system. I'm setting up the name of the inventory file. This is our host list. And I'm just going to call it inventory, and this will be in the same directory. Now, what we might not have seen before is the Paramiko underscore connection. With here, we can then go through and say anything that is using a Python Paramiko SSH connection, then can use these parameters. And we need this for our FreeBSD connection if we're not using key-based authentication, which currently we are not, as this is a completely clean install. So I can go through, and first of all, I'm just putting in a setting to record underscore host underscore keys. So when we're presented the SSH keys, we store them in our known hosts file. And so we're not being prompted to accept the key. We can go through and put our host key, checking, and the default is true. We're going to change this to false. So it's just these four settings that we need. Once we've got this set, we can go through and save our change. And we're ready to go through and take a look now at creating that inventory file. So if I go through and add in my inventory file, again, use any text editor that you want. And I'm going to set up a group. The group are in my square brackets. And we can go through and put in the IP address of my Ansible controller. And I'm calling this the local group and creating a second group, which I'm calling FreeBSD. And I'm going to put the IP address of the FreeBSD host, which is then 102. Now, I know I only have one element in each group, but this is then just organizing so I can target the hosts that I want to relatively easily. Having created the host list in the form of my inventory file, we can then set up inventory variables, and I'm going to do that through the group underscore vars directory, so we can create that in relationship to my inventory file. And then I can go ahead and edit the group vars and local group file. So this represents my local Ubuntu controller. And I can go through and say, for this connection, we are going to use a local connection, not an SSH connection. So Ansible _ connection. And this is a YAML file, so we separate using a colon, and it's just local. Once we've done that, I can go through and save it, and then I can go through and copy this file across, and I can use escape and dot to bring up the last argument, and then bring escape and dot again, and just change that to group vars and FreeBSD, edit that last argument, and we can change then our connection to Paramiko. So using the Paramiko interface from Python to SSH, we need this if we're using password-based authentication, which I say at the moment I haven't set up key-based authentication, so it's easier to just use Paramiko as a connection. And the second setting that I'm putting in here is to make sure that once we have got Python installed on the FreeBSD host, we've got the correct path through to the interpreter. And on FreeBSD, we're going to find this in /usr and then /local bin. So once we've got that in, we can check that we've got everything spelled correctly. So this is pretty good. I've got Python spelled correctly. I've got interpreter spelled correctly. That's unusual for me. So we're looking like we are ready to go. So let's go ahead and save our changes, clear our screen, and we can go through and just take a look at those inventory variables. So using Ansible-inventory --list, and it's easiest to read in YAML format. And we can see then for our FreeBSD hosts, we've got our Paramiko connection and the Python interpreter. And then for our local connection, we've got that listed as our 101 host. So now we can go through and target the FreeBSD group. -K is specifying to prompt for the password. -B is to elevate our privileges. -M for the module. We're using the raw module as we don't as yet have Python installed. And the arguments we're going to put then are pkg install -y and the package Python. FreeBSD doesn't have Python installed by default, so we have to set it up before we can use Ansible in a full and meaningful way. The password then we can go through and enter, and now it's doing its hard work, going out, locating our Python package, and hopefully installing it for us. Once we have got Python installed, with everything set up now, we're going to be able to manage this in a standard Ansible way. Many of our Python modules are going to be working straight out of the box. So now, as we can see that we have done the install, we can go ahead and use Ansible, targeting the all group, prompting for the password as we're still not using key-based authentication, using the ping module to check then that Python is responding. So I still have to set the SSH password. The idea is then long term I would be using key-based authentication, but you can see now from both hosts I'm getting the response from the Python interpreter.
All that is left to say is thank you for watching. If you've enjoyed this, then you are probably sadder than I first thought. For more of this drivel, please subscribe, like and comment to @TheUrbanPenguin.